I've always liked to feel that my thrillers have a sense of momentum, and I think that that comes from one event is leading right into another. And so it's not like a literary novel where we can sort of put our feet up on the ottoman for a couple of months and ponder what's going to happen next in our lives. These books do take place in a very compressed time.
Welcome to Book Reporter Talks To, where today's guest is Linwood Barclay. We met first in 2007 at the Virginia Festival of the Book, and I've been a huge fan of his work since then. The last time I interviewed him was, I think, 2 years ago. We were in our New York office. It was July. It was about 1 billion degrees out, and we had to turn off the window air conditioner so that the sound wouldn't be there when we did the video. And Linwood and I melted into our chairs as the interview continued. Greg says you could see the sweat stains getting longer, so it was very funny. So today we're both more chill, and we're going to be talking about his new book, Find You First, his 20th book, and yet another Book Reporter Bets on selection. Now, something I want you to note, because a lot of you watching this in the United States, is that Linwood is sold really big around the world, including the UK and Canada, where he was this book was the Sunday Times and Irish Times bestseller. And in Canada, it's a #1 Canadian fiction book, as noted by the Globe and Mail and Toronto Star. So we're a superstar here that we are lucky enough to have with us today. So welcome, Linwood.
Thanks so much, Carol. It's so nice to see you. This is just great. And I should probably explain too, not that anybody cares, but we're still in a sort of semi-lockdown here where it has not been legal to open a hair salon since November 25th. So I'm just working away on this mess at the back here and using more. I mean, I don't think in my entire life I bought hair product and gel, and now I go through a jar in a couple of hours. But it's been, anyway, that explains my rather sort of unkempt appearance today.
Well, I was going to say you a hair elastic, so you could do like ponytail in the back.
We're almost there. Close. I think we're almost there. It won't be much longer. If they don't open up the barbershops again, it's not going to be much longer.
So it's really been since November. Everything's been shut down.
Well, it's been off and on. Like around November, I got my hair cut on the last day you could. I happened to get to the end, and so we've gone through varying stages depending on what region of Ontario. So Toronto, where I live, has been mostly, because we had higher counts in the city, has been mostly locked down, at least for certain kinds of services, most of that time, certainly since the end of December. While some towns outside of Toronto and so forth, in March, April, May, you could go there and maybe get a haircut. Although if you were from Toronto, they didn't want to deal with you because you were from a high incident rate area. But now the entire province is like that. And we think maybe in the next 10 days or so, things might change.
Wow.
Our numbers are, like a lot of places, are going down quite a bit.
And where are you guys on vaccines? Are you on round 1 or round 2 on vaccines? Because they're doing something different.
I've had my first shot. I'm not scheduled to get the second shot until the end of July. So we're quite a number of weeks or months behind you guys. Now, they've said in the last few days that those second shots, we may be able to move them up. So maybe I'll be able to get it maybe by the end of this month or so.
Wow.
But we are behind on that.
Yeah. Well, we had that it was like the Hunger Games at the beginning because you couldn't find anything. And then all of a sudden it was like free for all. It was like, go now, everyone go, everyone. It was just, I don't know. It's just been absolutely crazy. It's
been so confusing here. It's really hilarious because for a while there, they were saying that you could only leave your home to go to essential services. And in the same breath, they said, non-essential merchants, here are the hours you can be open. So it was like, you can be open, but no one's allowed to go to you. It was just, it was crazy.
And then you have to sit there and say, wait, it's the hair place. I would see the hair place as being essential. Personally, I would have seen the hairdresser as being essential.
Well, speaking for my wife Neetha, I think she would be willing to risk the Ebola virus right now to go to get her hair done. Just about anything she would be willing to risk.
I was looking at my husband and scissors back a while ago, and I was like looking, and he's like, "No." I was like, "Okay." So let's start with you telling us a little bit about Find You First, because I always find we might get deep into the interview and it's like, wait, what's this book about? I don't know what it is.
Well, yeah, very quickly. It's about a very wealthy tech guy in his early 40s named Miles Cookson. And Miles has all the money in the world, but he's learned that the one thing money can't buy is time. And he has been diagnosed with a terminal illness, that he has a certain amount of time perhaps left. And not only that, he's learned that this, and they said to him, well, it's kind of a good thing you never had kids and so forth, because there's a 50% chance that this condition you have is passed on to the next generation. And what the others don't know is that 20 some years ago, Miles was a sperm donor, and there could be any number of grown children of his out there. And after a lot of soul searching, Miles thinks he should probably try to find out who they are, let them know that they should get themselves checked, but also who will he leave all of these millions to, And as he begins this quest to track down these individuals, they all start vanishing one by one before he can get to them. And so is it one of the other possible heirs who's wiping out the competition, or is there something even more sinister taking place that Miles is going to have to confront sooner or later?
So
That's our pitch.
it goes pow, pow, pow from there. So what's the kernel of the idea? Like, what did you first have on this one?
I think sometimes, you can do a whole book and you think, where did this come from? But I think there was a photo essay in the New York Times New York Times Magazine a couple of years ago. And it was someone who had gone across the country and had photographed half siblings. People they realized from the same sperm donor, and it was very sort of personal interest, human interest kind of story. And of course, being a thriller writer, you look at that and you think, wow, how could that go horribly wrong? And I think that was kind of the beginning. And plus, there's a parallel story that's going on in Find You First, that some may think that the inspiration might have something to do with Jeffrey Epstein, and they would not necessarily be wrong. And so those kind of things, and then so these two ideas start to come together, and then Find You First happened.
And it's very interesting because you've got these two parallel stories happening and you're like, why is this guy here? And then you figure out why he's there. And, it's Miles Cookson has like this limited amount of time. It reminds me of you can't take it with you. Like no matter how much you make, you can't take it with you. And he clearly feels the same. And he's there. I've got to go do this. I've got to go find these people. I think he's going to be altruistic, share the money with them. And he's on this hunt. And there's this young girl who thinks that's her father, and she goes on the hunt with him. Did you want to have him have like an accomplice to go with this? Like,
yeah, I thought that it made a lot of sense for them to connect. I mean, he does, of this list of his possible heirs, he does find this first one, and she's been searching too in her own way, and has managed to track down one half brother, that she has. And they connect, and so they become, from there on, it's kind of like a buddy trip. It's a buddy road movie, and they go on this thing together. And they forge this connection. This very young woman and this guy in his 40s, and I think in some ways Chloe is that character's name, and I think she might be maybe my favorite character in the book. Mm-hmm. She's very strong-willed, very very creative, and she knows who she is, and even at a time when she's trying to find out more about who she is, and she's a really good kind of foil for my Miles character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because she's like, well, what about this? What about that? Let's go here. Let's go there. She's completely ready to do and hang out with him. There's this really crazy thing that happens at the beginning of chapter 6. I actually thought it was earlier. I looked this up today. Is then there's a scene at Jeffrey Epstein, but really his name is, what's his name? Jeremy
Pritkin. Jeremy Pritkin. Yeah.
Jeremy Pritkin's house. Jeremy Pritkin wants to have a Winnebago brought into his home. And I thought that in New York City, that might not be a crazy thing.
Oh, no.
Some very wealthy person would want to do this. So where's the idea for this? Let's put the Winnebago in the house.
Well, my character of this Jeremy Pritkin, he's got more money than God. He's incredibly wealthy. He has this astonishing massive brownstones, several put together. And he grew up, he's made his fortune in highways, building highways and so forth. And as a kid, his parents had a Winnebago, and they traveled the country with it. So it's kind of this touchstone thing for him. And being sort of eccentric, he wants to take this small RV and have it raised up to the third floor of this brownstone and put into the building. And it's part of this very huge office. And the idea for that, I think, I was looking through, I don't know what magazine it was, some style magazine, Architectural Digest. And there was a guy who had this beautiful, really neat loft. And right in the loft was an Airstream trailer. And this sort of iconic American sort of, masterpiece of road travel. That's I think a really iconic kind of a creation. It's so typically American. And he had it within his loft and used it as part of his office, would go in. And I thought that was really so neat and kind of kitschy. And of course, what not everybody knows about me is that when I was in my teens, I essentially ran a trailer park. My parents had bought a cottage resort and trailer park in the Kawartha Lakes region of Ontario. And my parents had always, all their trips had been hitching a trailer to the back of the car and driving 500 miles a day to see the countryside, and which was a pretty horrible vacation for a 5-year-old, sitting in the back of a car while your parents looking at all the scenery go by. You're looking at sort of window cranks and red vinyl upholstery because the windows are clear. But so that sort of thing is kind of, it's in my blood. In fact, right here by my shelf, I have this wonderful someone, because they know I love trailers. There's a birdhouse that looks exactly like a little trailer over here. And so for all those reasons, I thought that would be a really cool thing for him to have installed. It's a bit eccentric, but it suits his personality. And you never know, sometimes these things will pay off later in the story.
Yeah. We're not giving anything away there. That's where the Winnebago idea, it's funny. There's this place called Jets.com, like you can rent a jet. And somehow I have ended up on the Jets.com mailing list. I have no idea why. So the other day I get this thing that I need to act immediately because I can get a 10% discount on the rates. And the light jet 20 hours is going to be $110,400. And the prices go up to the heavy jet for $219,000 for this. And I'm like, how did I get on this list? And then more than that, like, first I want to know who they think I am. But the second thing I want to know is who does this? Like, who are these people that this is,
Well, like I heard about one time that there's one of these astonishing yachts that's like 60 feet long or bigger that you could rent. This came up because I think we were in Halifax. No, we were in St. John's, Newfoundland, and we saw this astonishing yacht. And then we found out that it was a yacht that you can rent with the entire crew and a caterer and a cook and all that sort of stuff, and bring 8 of your friends and go for a week, and it's like $250,000. And I thought, gee, why don't we do that? Except for the fact that we need the $250,000. But there's people have got more money to burn than we can imagine. And Jeremy Pritkin is that kind of guy.
Jeremy Pritkin, but I completely saw, this is also Jets.com. Also, when the Super Bowl is coming, sends me a note that if I'm planning to go, the runway time is going to be limited, so I should reserve now. So I really should write like a whole little scenario of my year with the jet that I never got on, because it's constantly, I get these notes though. It's funny,
Have you ever asked if you could just, have it for a couple hours? That might be, you'd be able to get that for like $15,000.
Yeah. Well, that's like at the beginning of the pandemic when everyone went to the Hamptons. They were saying that someone would come in and say, like, I want a steak. And they say, how many do you want? And they go, the whole tray. Like, this is what I want. And it was like, we may never have food again. And someone told me that there was a liquor store in the Hamptons that had their best week ever, the third week of March 2020, because everybody came out and everybody wanted wine. So this book takes place in a very compressed time period, which gives you this urgent feel, like we're on the run. A lot of your books are like that. They're set up in this very finite time. Is it set up that way to keep the action going? Or is it set up that way that we got to just keep the story boom, boom, boom?
I don't know, because I've always liked to feel that my thrillers have a sense of momentum. And I think that comes from one event is leading right into another. And so it's not like a literary novel where we can sort of put our feet up on the ottoman for a couple of months and ponder what's going to happen next in our lives. These books do take place in a very compressed time, and generally, my protagonists are ordinary people and who get caught up in an extraordinary circumstance. So this is going to be this snapshot in time where something incredibly stressful and life altering is going to happen.
Mhm.
And so, and it's not even necessarily that I plan it that way, but it's just kind of always the way that my books tend to go. I
Mm.
mean, I've got a book coming out next year. I think the whole thing takes place in a day.
Wow.
Um, I think that's right. I think the whole book takes place in a day. In fact, I have two books coming out next year, and I think the other one all takes place over 3 days. So yeah, everything. I like that kind of time compression. Maybe it's because the first time we met at the Virginia Festival of Book, all we talked about was 24.
Exactly.
Show. So maybe it's just in our nature. We just like these stories that just are like bing, 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 bing. Like this is the way it's going to go.
This is what happened. I remember that show. It was like this is what happens. And then that music came up and you were ready to see what was going to happen. I agree. It's propulsive. Have you ever done 23andMe or Ancestry? Have you ever done any what? No.
No, I haven't done, and that plays a part in the book. Is this, this is a thriller I couldn't have written 15 years ago. I mean, now you turn on your TV at night and there's a commercial here. Send us your saliva sample. We'll tell you everything about you and who you might be related to. Well, you couldn't do that 15 years ago. So there are elements to this thriller, the key points that you couldn't have done it before, and so that intrigued me. Not enough that I wanted to know about my own personal background. And it's quite a bit, it's kind of like that. There's like that joke where you're not feeling well. And so you find somebody else who's feeling the same thing. And so you'd say, tell them, please go to the doctor. And whatever the doctor tells you, I will take that to heart. That's must be what I have. So my brother did the 23andMe or whatever it was. He sent out, he did it. So I figured, well, whatever he found out, that's going to apply to me. And I don't recall him finding out anything particularly exciting or urgent or whatever.
Yeah. So it was like, okay, you could just
We
skip
come
this.
from very dull stock, I believe.
But that it's changed with your generation. You changed that. Did you noodle at the ancestor sites for a while? Because I think it's interesting to hear what people find, especially when there was a criminal case. What's it? You'll Be Afraid in the Dark. It's the one that was the doc about it was on HBO.
Yeah.
It was, and they actually found the people because of DNA, and it's always changed now what you can do even in criminal circumstances.
Well, that's right. Because let's say they have DNA from a crime scene and they get access to the database that 23andMe or Ancestry has, and they get a hit, and it's not from the actual perpetrator, but it's from the perpetrator's cousin or brother or sister. Mm-hmm. You think, okay, we haven't found him, but we found a relative. Mm-hmm. And then you go to that, and then you start looking at that person. You think, who in their circle looks like a likely suspect, and then they solved it. Mm-hmm. And which can be, I wish I could remember the specifics, but it's a case like that where they got a pizza crust from somebody or other, they had a suspect, and they followed him to a food court, and he discarded his pizza crust, and they grabbed it, and they determined, yeah, this is our guy.
Wow. See, and it's been a whole different way of doing law enforcement and detective work and whatever. It's like, where did you spit last? And that's what we need to be looking at.
That's right.
What did you do?
Who needs fingerprints? That's right.
So I'm guessing that Chloe was your favorite character to write. Was she your favorite?
I loved writing her. She's great because, Miles gets sort of caught up in some of the bigger issues about, well, if you knew that you had a condition or, that was going to lead to your demise, wouldn't you want to know? And she's pushing back on these things. Why do I need to know that? Why do I want to know that? If there's something I could do about it, why worry about that? Or being told, well, you've got 5 years left, but I could step in front of a bus tomorrow. Mm-hmm. So she fights back and pushes on some of his. And then when he talks about his fortune that he has, she's like, I don't need your money. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be just fine. I know I've got a plan and so forth. I don't need your dough. And so I like her. She's just, she's feisty. She's her own person. I really like her.
She's just looking for family. She's just looking for, are you my dad? Are you my dad is all she really cares about. So which was the most challenging character? Was it Pritkin?
No, I don't think so. Well, that's an interesting question because in the first draft of this novel, he was actually much more Epstein-like than he is in this version, in the final version. So we thought, yeah, that can be inspired, but we don't need to make him the same kind of guy. And so I changed a lot of elements of in this character to make him his own. So I think when I did a second draft, that was probably the character that I sort of worked on nuancing a little more.
Gotcha.
There were other characters I did more with, like Miles's assistant, even his driver, the woman who takes him around. I made some of the more secondary characters. I kind of worked a little more with, did a bit more with in the subsequent draft. But that's a lot of times the way a second draft is. I mean, this first draft is just get the story out there, you get it done, and you've got your structure, you've got it, and then you can go back in and tweak it. You know, I always compare, I don't know, maybe because my dad at one time was a carpenter, but, you know, before he became a commercial artist, but I always think of a first draft as putting the house up. Get the foundation down, you put the house up, put the walls on, you got the roof on, there you've got it. And then the second draft is let's go inside and wallpaper and figure out where the furniture's gonna go, move stuff around, you know, and redecorate, so forth. But we've got our main structures good to go.
So at what point does your agent and editor see it? Like, you've got draft one, you do draft two, then do they see it? Like, how polished are you? Or like, do you have to make sure they like sign off, like, okay, they've liked the idea at the beginning, but what you do with the idea before you get too far?
Yeah, and it's funny, I had, and we may get to this, I had another book that was ready to go, that was more like a Michael Crichton thriller. And my publishers had that, and it would have been the next book. But then I happened to tell them what I planned to write afterwards, which was this book. And they said, oh my God, we'll wait for that. We want to do that one now. And so it varies from book to book. I think in this novel, I think I might have given the first 80 or 100 pages to my agent to read, just to see if she liked the way it was going. But, and I can't remember but more typically, I kind of, once I have an idea I like, I write the whole thing. And then once I have finished my own very, very first draft, I go back and spend another week or so on it and polish it and tweak it. But I still figure at the end of that, that's my first draft. And that is what I give to my agent and my publishers. And then after they've, you know, had some thoughts about it, then I'm into the second draft. Like I did the second draft on next week's book. I finished it about a month ago. And I think that I spent 3 weeks doing a lot of work on that. I always find that time period from when you deliver a novel, a first draft, to your editors and wait to hear back from them is always like waiting for tests back from the doctors. You know, is it, how bad is the news, or am I going to live? I don't know. I always think it's the same. That's a really bad period. I almost don't want to hear from them because I'm afraid of what they're going to say. Yeah.
So funny. So when you get feedback, okay, does it go to UK, Canada, US simultaneously, and they confer, or you get 3 sets of notes?
Well, it goes, well, of course, now that I'm with in all English sort of language territories, I'm now with HarperCollins, and HarperCollins US kind of absorbed and took over Canada. So when I'm finished, I give it to my editors at HarperCollins in the US and UK at the same time.
Okay.
And then those 2 editors read it, and then they confer, and they think, what do we think Linwood needs to do with this? And then I get a set of notes that are the product of that discussion. So I get 1 set. Years ago, way back when I did a book called The Accident, we hadn't quite worked out a system like that. And I always love to tell the story. I heard from my editor in New York after I delivered The Accident, and she called and she said, I love it. I love it. It's so wonderful. The next day, my UK editor phoned. He said, I think you need to start over. Now, and the sad thing is that he was right. And it's possible that they both wanted the same things, but the approach was different. My New York editor might have said, oh, it's fantastic. I love it. I just need you to do this, and this. And the UK editor was like, you need to start over because you have to do this, and this. So I don't know. But anyway, after that, we decided it was best to have these people talk to each other and then, you know, present a united front. So I don't step in front of a bus. You know?
Yeah, because I've heard of people that say, I got this from the editor, I got this from my agent. They're completely different. Where do I go from here? And they're completely different sets of notes. I know.
I know. And in fact, earlier on, and I have a fabulous agent, as you know, and there were times when she would make suggestions before I delivered, like major ones. And then we decided we might as well take out that step because let's just find out what they think about it and go from there.
And then go on from there. So do you hear different things about your books from UK, Canada, and US readers? Do you hear, or are people relating to the same things? And I'm always
I,
curious about that.
I think for the most part, everyone's kind of reacts the same way. It's funny, the one major difference that I noticed, and I don't even notice it anymore, but in the earlier books, and there's a lot of what I would call salty language in my novels. And because I think when people are under the most intense pressure of their entire life, they don't say darn it a lot. And so, people kind of react the way you might expect they would speak. And it was almost always when I would get a complaint about the language in the novel, the foul language, it was from the US. And it was from the UK is like, just go ahead and swear all you want, we don't care. And but the US would get sort of very touchy about it. And I always thought that was amusing. And it was Mark Billingham who first made this point, I think. And that was, so you're okay reading about gross killings and dismemberment and people doing horrific things to each other. That doesn't offend. You're happy to read that for the purpose of entertainment, but you just want it with nice words.
Yeah, yeah.
So I just, which I thought is always kind of amusing.
Yeah, yeah. How about the fact that your books are set in the US? Do people have a feeling about that? I mean, you live in Canada, you were originally born in the US, yes.
Yeah.
But you and Sherry LePain, you both set books in the US. Like she's always in upstate New York someplace.
Yeah.
And you're like
I'm often
someplace.
in Connecticut or upstate New York, but a lot of times I'm in Milford, Connecticut, which is where my two aunts, my two fathers, two sisters lived, and I'd spend a lot of time down there. It's funny, there's Canada feels, I think, sometimes a little, when you live next door, Pierre Trudeau called it about sleeping with an elephant. Canada is sleeping with an elephant. We're the mouse and there's the elephant. And so there's this kind of feeling that we're sort of don't want to be overwhelmed by the cultural and so forth influences in the US. So sometimes Canadian readers will be miffed, why did you set your book in the US? Now, if you'd set it in Thailand or India or Australia, they wouldn't even ask that question. But it's because it is the US. And part of it's marketing thing, and part of it is, first of all, Canada has a very well-deserved tradition of literary fiction. And for a long time, I think was kind of less interested in publishing genre fiction and crime fiction. But I wrote 7 novels before I had a Canadian publisher. These earlier books of mine were presented to Canadian publishers and they passed. And so my first novels were all published by Bantam. And so sometimes it was a case of you dance with the one what brung you.
Yeah. So set it where they're going to know. Set it that.
Yeah.
Last year you didn't have a book. And originally when we talked about that after Elevator Pitch, we were talking, you're really dismayed. And then I remember calling in about like May last year and saying, how happy are you that you don't have a book in 2020?
Yeah,
and
well,
I knew a bunch of authors that didn't have a book last year. And I was like, dodge the bullet,
And yet I have, and in some markets, I still didn't dodge it. Like, for example, in the province of Ontario, which is Canada's largest, most populated province, Find You First is the Costco pick of the month. But because we're under strict orders, stores can only sell essentials. The book section in Costco is roped off and you can't go into it.
Are you kidding?
I'm not kidding. It's not considered an essential. So those sections of the store are closed off. And so we've managed to get, to the top of the bestseller list even without that. But my own publisher had said, we think we have sold in this particular market that I live in, twice as many books if it weren't for that.
Wow.
So, but I mean, last year's book was two things happened. I mean, first of all, we had been thinking that we would delay the publication, which would have normally been September of 2020 till about January, because we wanted to just avoid the whole US political scene in the fall, because we figured it's very hard to get attention when all that chaos is happening. And then we had the pandemic. So then my January release got pushed to May of this year, at least here. They went with February in the UK. So yeah, so 2020 was the first year since 2004 when I did not have a new book out of the calendar year. But next year, it looks like there's going to be 2. So, I mean, we have the new book this year, and then as I mentioned, I alluded to earlier, and we've talked about this before, I wrote a more Michael Crichton kind of a thriller,
Mhm,
and I describe it as think Jurassic Park, but instead of dinosaurs, it's self-driving cars.
mhm.
And it's about a test community, like a Martha's Vineyard, where everyone surrenders their regular car, and a big company gives everybody a self-driving car, because the best way to test them is if every car on the road is an autonomous self-driving car, because they all communicate with each other. They all have this like a network, hive mind. Then a virus gets introduced in the system, and all the cars essentially become homicidal. It's like 1,000 Christines, and so I wrote that book at least 3 years ago, and we've been trying to figure out when to bring it out or how to bring it out. And it looks like it's finally going to come out next year. I think in some markets it might be an ebook only, and others it'll be print as well. So that's coming out, I think, probably about a year from now.
But think about it right now with what's going on with all the takeovers of the power companies and whatever by bots or whatever is like infiltrating
Or
and
ransomware too.
ransomware. That's the word I was looking for, ransomware. So just think about that story up against it's like, okay, we're doing this with the cars. You can see it happening. You can
Yeah.
actually see how things could be happening from a foreign power or somebody like that. Just looking at the pipeline being taken over in the United States.
And even now I'm thinking maybe I should make it, but the book's done, but I have to do an edit on it. I'm thinking maybe it should be ransomware instead, because that's so in the news now.
Mhm.
But we have a title for that book, which is I came up with, just hit me one night, Look Both Ways.
Ooh, I love it. I love it. Yeah.
So that's coming. And plus next year there will be still the usual, annual regular thriller for me.
Yeah. But the other one, okay, so when you're talking about it 2-3 years ago, it would be like, oh, that's a little bit far-fetched. Right now with ransomware, right now with oh, the car could go do this, that, the other thing, the way you've heard cars have killed people and things like that. It may be prescient that you were just like, there then writing it, but now it's, coming out.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like crazy. But, did you have a harder time writing during the pandemic? Like, could you write or could you just tune everything out and do it?
I did. I wrote a novel last year from September to Christmas. So I just did my job. My writing is a very isolating kind of occupation anyway. And so it didn't really have an impact in that way. I think there were some days, I think a lot of us have found some days a little harder to focus than others.
Mhm.
But you just started thinking, when is this going to be over? And
Mhm.
so there was that, but I still got work done. It's funny, going back to March, the beginning of March of last year, I had just delivered a novel, and I just delivered a second or third draft on a screenplay I was working on. And I thought, I don't have anything on my plate, maybe we should go on a trip. And then like 2 weeks later, we had just done one too. In February of last year, we went to Dubai. We were in Dubai for a week because I was invited there for a big festival. So I suppose if you were going to get one last trip in, that was far away. That was a big one.
That was a great trip. I remember seeing pictures of that. Great trip. And then you come back and it's like, now you can't leave the house. Now you can't go to the store, And, it's funny because we're emerging here in the States. Memorial Day weekend, people were every place. I was just looking at pictures and I noticed a lot of young mothers were traveling together, like no children. It's like, here, you've got the kids and who was in New Orleans and who was there. And it was really funny to watch. Like, it's like we got sprung. People had college graduations or simulated them. Like Harvard didn't have a graduations, but a friend took pictures of her kid on the campus because, if you spent that much money, you want something for it,
Yeah.
And you're just watching all this like explosion. But my theory was the first thing you're going to do is go travel and see friends like close with and family first, and then, close friends. And then from there, places you've always wanted to go to. So travel in the States here is like nuts. It's like the airport lines are out of control because everyone's on the move. But where you're not going is Europe. Where you're not going is any place else in the world. So everybody is like, discover the US,
Yeah, the first thing I want to do is we want to hug our grown kids. At least we see them a lot because we all live in the same city. So that's nice. But, they haven't been in the house. They don't come, they want to come in and so forth. So that's the first thing. And of course I've been thinking, well, what do I want to do first? Would I like to go to Paris, whatever? And I think, no, I just want to go to my local diner have an omelet, hash browns, and coffee, and be abused by a surly waitress.
Mhm.
That's what I want.
The goals have changed. It's like haircut and the surly waitress have now moved to the top of the list.
You
And
just
last year, who would have known? I was at the garden center this week, and because I always do flowers in the back, and I said, "How's it going?" And they said, "Not great." And I said, "What do you mean?" And they said, "I think everybody's gotten over being like a gentleman farmer. Like last year, everybody was planting their own vegetables. I mean, the stuff that was going on last year was like out of control. Like you couldn't get certain plants if you went to the store, like lettuce, it was like sold out. But lettuce growing was sold out. Seeds were gone. I remember going on a website and they said, we do not have enough seeds. Like we'll ration what we're doing. And I'm like, really? Because I do this every single year. So you're looking at all the stuff. So he says, this year, I think they're all at the shore. Like, I don't think they're
Yes.
doing this anymore. I think they gave up.
I tell you one funny story. My very close friends of ours who live in Seattle, and he's this genius scientist guy. He's helped me with some of my books, including Find You First. He was the one who advised me on what kind of a condition my main character would have to suit my story purposes. And they have grown kids who live in Manhattan, or a grown daughter and partner. And of course, Manhattan grocery stores, it was kind of hard to get stuff. So from Seattle, they were FedExing them boxes of potatoes and stuff like that. Like just not a fruit basket, but a vegetable basket.
Here, take this food, take this food. Yeah. It was like last year you couldn't get the toilet paper. That was the big thing. It was like you just couldn't. And it was like, what is going on? But then I learned those words that I never really knew, which was supply chain. Like
Yeah.
I didn't know people actually majored in this in school. Like I had no idea. And how like usually toilet paper was in large rolls going into industrial places, and now they had to make it for everybody at home in different like sizes again. And how production of meat used to be in these big things to go to restaurants, and now it was this whole and I was like, wow, I never thought about that. But you even saw it with books, is how are we going to get the books from one place to the other? What were we going to do?
Yeah.
And shortly before the pandemic happened, actually I think it was January, I was at the Penguin Random House warehouse in Maryland. I was at a conference and they invited us out to go see this warehouse. So the whole time I was picturing how you were going to move all these books through, like how many people touched something or whatever that were going to be wiping in order to be safe. And it was just tantamount of every single thing getting to one place or the other. That's what you had to worry about, you know? So was the title of this always Find You First?
No, we had a long time working on a title on this book. I'm trying to remember I can't remember what some of them were. And I think finally I think I'd come up with a title that was something like, Don't Let Him Find You First. And then we thought, oh, we like that, but let's trim it down.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I can't remember. I know I spent a lot of time struggling with titles
Mm-hmm.
for this one, and then finally that one just seemed to kind of work.
Yeah, no, it's like so great. And then the cover, did they have a lot of tries on? Well, the cover of the UK is completely different. I
Totally
should
different.
share that.
That's
But
one I have one here. Do I have one here? No, I don't have one here. The UK cover is completely different concept, which I also really like. But I think this one is really, I like this one.
yeah, like so. And did you play around with this one a number of times before you got to this?
To which
The UK, the US cover. Was this the first one you saw, or did they play around with it?
I think that was the first one. The only thing that we did different with the UK cover was we had some lead-in lines, and they were one will change your life, one will end it, who will, and then ... and led into Find You First.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then Stephen King happens to think this is your best one, and I agree with Stephen King. Just so you know, like we're in agreement on this.
Yeah, he was very supportive. He thought he just loved it. I had a couple emails from him while he was reading it, and so yeah, he really loved this one.
Yeah, I really, really love it too. It's George Newbern narrates the audio. Do you select the narrator for the audio? Do you have anything to do with that?
A little bit. A lot of time, I don't think this happened with every book, but a lot of times what they will do is they say we have it down to 3, and they send me samples of 3 different readers, and so I will listen to them, and they're usually all great,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just kind of just pick one, and I'll listen to 3 of them, and I don't know, maybe I like this one just a little more, and I'll say sure, let's do this one. But and of course I don't listen to audiobooks. I never do. So it's about the only time I ever hear them is when I hear little snippets. That's the way else do that.
It's like,
But
yeah.
but I'm sure they've all done a really good job.
This one I listened to a snippet of this morning. It was really good. It was really good. You've toured for the books in the past. You've always toured, which is a love-hate relationship because there are airplanes that will be late. There are places that will be this, that, the other thing. Have you enjoyed virtual events or do you want to get on the road again? What's the feeling right now?
As I said earlier, writing is such an isolating kind of occupation that tours and going to events is kind of the only time you actually see people who've read your books and have contact. It's very hard to autograph books virtually,
Mm-hmm.
and so I miss that. Depends on the kind of tour. U.S. tours are really hard because the distances are so huge,
Mm-hmm.
and you fly every day, and some plane gets delayed, or you're always up at 5 in the morning to go to the airport, and then you fly and you change flights, and it's just so their U.S. tours are really pretty grueling. So that the travel aspect I have not missed. UK tours I usually have a better time on only because first of all everything's close together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you're going to fly, if you're going to fly somewhere, it's probably an hour's flight at the most, and a lot of places you go to by train or you drive. Those work pretty well. And even if you travel every day, the travel doesn't overwhelm you. And
Mm-hmm.
so I would hope that by next year that there'll be at least some kind of tour to get back out there.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple of festivals in Canada in the fall that are up on the West Coast that I've been invited to, and it's sort of tentative at the moment whether it'll be virtual or in person.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm kind of hoping it can be in person because they're beautiful places, and it'd be nice to just go just to have a change.
Yeah, we have a poll up on our site right now. It said live author events are coming back. Are you comfortable with it? Like we know what's going on. And 32% of the people the last time I looked said they're ready now. And then some say towards the fall where they don't know. And then some say, and this was very interesting, that I think it was something like 32% said they wish there could be an author event close to their home. So the really interesting thing about Zoom and all the interviews that are being held this way is how many more people can watch and see an author that they've never heard talk before.
That's a plus. I mean, what I have wondered is if publishers generally will think, well, maybe we don't really need to do book tours anymore
Yeah.
because we can connect with a lot of people this way. And I haven't missed a flight yet doing a Zoom event. And so, will they want it? And it's not cheap to fly an author all over the place,
Mhm.
And so, will they want to do that? I don't know. The funny thing is that I've been doing Zoom events like with this with you, which would be great. I've been just doing them kind of constantly since the beginning of the year because the book came out on May 4th. As my agent said, book tours end. You go out and you blitz and you talk, and then you come back and you're done.
Yeah.
But now because Zoom, they just kind of like I've got one later today, I've got one next week, I've got a couple in July. There's kind of now that we have this available to us,
Mhm.
I end up doing quite a bit more of them.
Well, I even thought of the last time we interviewed you was only because you were in town for Thriller Fest.
Mhm.
And often the authors came through New York when they were on their marketing, like when they were in meeting about their marketing, final plans and stuff like that. And we wouldn't have had read the book at that point, and it would have been pointless to do an interview. So we're actually loving this. And I've also interviewed some people in Australia, New Zealand,
Yeah.
things that it would never come across your radar. And a lot of authors, as much as everybody goes, oh, everybody comes through New York, not really, especially during tour time. And I remember I had you and Sherry, a number of people we were interviewing because it was Thriller Fest and people would come through the city.
That's
But if it wasn't for these big conferences or whatever, so it got to the point where it's actually easier now to book something. And it's also not everything has to happen pub week. And I've often had publicists saying to me, we don't want you to do that. We want you to do 2 weeks out because we feel we can get, oomph from that. So,
That's right. And not only all of that, but I can now deposit a check with my phone.
right? I know.
Who could have imagined?
I got this thing from Chase yesterday going for the business account. They want me to do that and they're going to pay me to do it. And if I do 5 in this amount of time, and I'm like, really? That's like pretty amazing. Yeah.
I got a friend with RBC, the bank, the bank conglomerate. He's up, big up there, and he said the banks now have the public where they wanted them to be 5 years from now. in terms of being able to do like deposit checks with your phone and stuff. He said it has just galloped ahead of where the technology, but they really didn't expect to be here for another 5 years.
Yeah. It's like Zelle, all these kinds of things just for moving money around. It's all completely changed. So I know that you have the same title at your house that I do, which is Binge Director,
Yes,
which means you are in charge of what everybody's binging. Like,
that's right. I have business cards that say that binge director. Yes.
So I know that we both finished watching Mayor of Easttown this week, and it was amazing.
Yes.
I didn't guess the end. We do know our friend Stephen King did. So who the killer was. I didn't get that at all. So what else have you been watching? What have you been watching that you really love? Because it's been such a great year for binging.
Last night we finished Halston on Netflix.
Oh, that was great.
If Ewan McGregor has ever done anything better, I don't know what it is. It was amazing.
It's great.
Watch that. And we binged some things that we'd seen before, like going back a couple of months. No, going back to earlier in the pandemic, we rewatched all of Lost. Because we'd only ever seen it once. And of course, we remembered the big overall story, but I couldn't believe how much we had forgotten. So we watched all of that. And then another J.J. Abrams show that we'd never watched that our son Spencer was a fan of, Fringe. We thought, well, we'll give that a try. There were 100 episodes. Well, that kept us busy for a while. We watched all of that. I'm trying to think what's waiting up for. And of course, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's about to drop that we're looking forward to, like what Ted Lasso and the 7th season of Bosch, and a whole bunch of whole things that we're sort of, and in fact, the Kaminsky Method, if you've seen that, the 3rd season of that dropped last Thursday or Friday.
Yep.
All 6 episodes. We watched all 6 of them in one sitting. They were only half an hour, but still, I mean, we just thought this is great, and we just wiped it out. But you know what I think is interesting? I think it was you who made this point a few years ago when we were at Thriller Fest, and you had all these authors sitting together, and they were all talking about what are you binging, what are you watching, and we realized, or you pointed the point, that nobody was talking about books.
Mm-hmm.
And
they're reading, right?
And I think that the challenge for us as novelists is, what can we write that will make you turn off Netflix for a while? Because some of the best television that's ever been done is being done now. You can consume it like a novel. All the chapters land and episodes land at once. So what can we write that will just so grab you that you will, or just stop looking at your stupid phone for a while. So I think that's a big challenge for us.
It is. It is. Last night I was looking for the Friends reunion show, and I was like, okay, where is HBO Max on this television? Like, I look at the cable bill and I realize how expensive this is. So they've got to be in charge of this, because it's, and every time the bill goes up, it goes up like $15. And last night I was looking at the bills and I'm like, where is that on the bill? I was trying to do comparisons, because it just always goes up. It never goes down. And I was there like, this is really fun, because you saw the sets and you saw what was going on before, and then you saw these people come back later on. And it was just this nostalgic moment for this show that aired for such a long time that people fell in love with. But then you're back on the scene again. You're back on what's going on. So
we watched about a third of the reunion show. We kind of thought it wasn't up to much. We just thought it was interesting to just look at Matthew Perry and ask ourselves, what happened to you? But
supposedly he had dental work that day.
Oh, I don't know what, anyway, that poor guy. And but it's funny, Friends is a show that we never watched when it aired. And only about 4 years ago, we thought, what was this about? And so now we've seen them all a couple times.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of interesting to hear how they created the show and how they put the characters together. That part was really interesting, because you just think they came together, but how long they looked for each character, and how long, and how they were yanking them off of other pilots. I find that the business behind the scenes is interesting. Like, I find the publishing business behind the scenes of, like, what was the title? What was it almost,
The most fascinating thing was that Matthew Perry was in a pilot for a show about luggage handlers at an airport in 60 years in the future. I thought, imagine 10 seasons of that.
They thought it was going to be a success. They thought it was going to be, they said, you shouldn't leave this one to go to the other one. And
oh God, who could have thought that was going to be good?
But you just sit there sometimes and you're like, okay, well, look, whoever thought that MGM would be bought by Amazon 25 years ago? I mean, let's just think about it, Bond, Amazon Bond, like, who thought, We just don't see these things. So what do you read besides crime fiction? You read a lot of crime fiction, but do you read a lot
I
beyond
read a
it?
lot of crime fiction, but not exclusively. You know what? The most interesting thing I read over, this is a long story, nobody will know anything about it. So there's an Ohio writer who was very well known through the 60s and 70s and the 80s, a guy named Don Robertson, and very kind of regional Ohio writer, but I read a couple of his books when I was in my late teens and really loved them. And he wrote this massive epic called Paradise Falls that was so huge, it was published in 2 volumes because it was 1,500 or 1,300 pages. And this is a guy who would write, 8-page long paragraphs. So you open a book and it's just text, just mountains of text. And I found, like 30 years ago, volume 2, the second half of the novel. And I just saved it all these years. A couple times I thought, well, I'll just donate it or give it away. And at a garage sale, where our summer place is, last year, a guy had it in volume 1. Who knew? And I picked it up. So I devoted January to it because it was so long and so immense and so epic. And I just loved it. So that was a bit different. It's very much a kind of a literary novel starting in the 1800s, going through for 50 years or whatever, this creation of this town in Ohio. But I lead write crime fiction. Every once in a while, I dive into a biography occasionally, or the occasional quote literary novel, like if Richard Russo has something new out or somebody like that, I'll grab that as well. But I read far fewer thrillers than you might think. I read crime novelists who I think just are extra special, whether it's James Lee Burke, somebody like that. I will, and of course, a huge Stephen King fan. I'm looking forward to his new one in August, summer. So can't wait for that.
So it's like a little bit across the board. So, okay, the one big question, how much progress have you made on the model trains during the pandemic? Has the whole setup in the new house done?
A ton. So I have this room in the basement, it's about 18 feet square, that this model railway fills. And I went through, there were a number of stretches through the pandemic where I was waiting to get notes on another draft of a book or something like that. So I had some clear time that in the past I might have gone somewhere, done something. So I worked on the model railway. So an immense amount of work got done on it in the last year. And of course, our son, who's a miniaturist, is a very talented model maker who is working for an exhibit that's going to open in Toronto that depicts Canada in miniature. He would come over and help me with lots of course, he couldn't help me for the past year. He would sometimes, if we were out of the house or gone for a while, he would come in and he would work on it in summer. But it's coming along. It looks pretty good. I've sort of been working a lot lately. I've sort of been on a stall, but it's coming along quite nicely.
Is it nice that when you finish writing, you go down and work on that because it's a totally different part of your brain that you work with?
I tend to work on it in big chunks of time. Like it's not like I'll work on, I'll be writing and I'll start writing at 2 and I'll go down and work on the base. I don't do that. I tend to, if I have finished a draft and I'm clear for a while, then I'm like, okay, I'm going to work on this for a few days, and I'll start working on it at 10 in the morning and maybe work on it till 1 in the afternoon or something. And because I worked on it a lot in February. There was this whole big valley with 2 bridges, and I thought, I'm going to do this month. But I do find that when you spend, a lot of your time imagining a world in your head and putting it on a computer screen, it's very fun to make a world with your hands. And it just, all the tension kind of goes out and all the stuff goes out of your head, and you just don't think about all this other stuff because you're too focused on putting this tree in or cleaning the wheels on this engine that keeps stalling on the dirty track or whatever. So you just kind of get wrapped up in that. And once they're working, it's very kind of zen-like because they're wandering around the room around you.
So is enough running at this point that there's actually a train running around? There is a train running around the room at this point.
That's the first thing I've done.
That's the first thing you did.
Within a month of starting to build it, and my son and I, Spencer and I built it, the supporting structure and everything, in May of 2019. That's when because we moved to the other house in December of 2018, and so I had tracked down, even though it was just nothing else was there. I had track and trains running within a month.
Wow.
So
Yeah, I think it's very zen. I love when you put the pictures of it up on Facebook of like, this is what I've built, this is what I've done. If anybody's watching, you're not following him on Facebook, have a delight on doing that. And in his newsletter, he's always giving great things of what he's binged and what he's watched and what he's read. So there's like, there are other opportunities to hear from Linwood besides being in the books. There's definitely a commentary out there that is very funny, especially on lockdown in Canada and haircuts,
Right, that's right. Twitter is my outlet. For years, I was a so-called humor columnist at the Toronto Star, and a column would be like 630 words. And now when I have the same idea that would be a column, I put it on Twitter in 280 characters, which tells me the columns were overwritten.
It was like far too many words, and you don't miss that day job.
Didn't need all that.
No, so you don't miss a day job. You've got Twitter now to be able to do this on. It's the same kind of a thing. Wow. Well, as always, it has been such a pleasure catching up with you. I look forward to seeing you in person somewhere.
Yep, it'll happen. It has to happen.
It'll happen. It'll have to happen. So thank you so much for joining us today. It's been such a pleasure. And to our readers, we look forward to seeing you next time on Book Reporter Talks To.
Thanks, Carol.